Today I'm going to try making gluten-free pizza base. The question is, will I nail it on my first try? I've been making pizzas off and on for years, but more in the last couple of years since we built our wood-fired pizza oven. But I've never tried gluten-free, haven't had much motive, much incentive to do so, but now I have, because I've got a couple of special guests coming to stay with us who are both unable to eat gluten. So the challenge is making a gluten-free pizza base for the first time. And if I get it right, we'll be adding this to our menu here at Suansuk Homestay for any guests that come and stay that are gluten intolerant. My ingredients for this recipe are 1 cup of oat flour and half a cup of chickpea flour. This is a replacement for gluten flour, obviously. And then there was also 1/4 cup of cornmeal. And this seemed a little bit unusual. I haven't seen other recipes using cornmeal, but I thought, well, first time I better follow the recipe straight, so I included it. The oat and chickpea flour I had to purchase. The cornmeal I already had because we use it to sprinkle on our pizza peel when we're slipping the pizzas into the oven. I had 2 teaspoons of psyllium husk powder. This is an alternative to gluten, so it helps the flour to bind. Then a teaspoon of yeast, a teaspoon of baking powder, which gives it a bit of fluff apparently, a teaspoon of salt, just a teaspoon of sugar, and then 3/4 cup of warm water and 2 tablespoons of oil. So I've added these to my bowl and given it a good mix, and then I let it rest for a little while and came back and mixed it some more, and it still appeared to be rather sloppy compared to what I'd normally have for a pizza base, but this is gluten-free, it's different ingredients. So from what I've learned online, from the videos that I've watched where the experts are showing you how to do this, there is quite a difference in the texture of the dough. So I wasn't put out, wasn't alarmed, I just carried on. And then I let it rest for probably an hour and a half, I think. I can't remember, I didn't time it, I just do it by feel. I just go back and check it every now and again, and I didn't really sense that it was rising at all, but it did seem to be getting a little less sloppy, a little more together. So when I felt that it was right, I pressed it out into a baking tray that I had oiled. So just balled the dough up and pressed it out into a baking tray. And I'd read this also, that you'd need to use a baking tray because a dough like this just doesn't have the strength and the integrity that a gluten dough has. I didn't have any parchment paper, otherwise I would have tried a piece of parchment paper underneath, but coating the tray with a decent slosh of oil certainly helped. And then I just used my bowl scraper, my plastic scraper, to tidy the edges up to get it looking a bit nicer, a little bit more round. And then it was into the oven, and we just, again, didn't time it, just eyeballed it, because the pizza oven, the wood oven, is such that you've just got to be careful. And we'd pre-baked it, got it probably a little bit over-baked. It stuck a little bit to the pan, but we managed to get it out and pretty much intact. And then we put some cornmeal onto the peel as well to help it slide off. And then we added our topping. So the idea of pre-baking it like this is to get the base to hold together and stay together once we start adding the toppings. Because if we added our toppings first, it was just going to be too much, too heavy, and probably too wet for the dough to be able to manage it. So the top of the dough, the top of this pizza base was quite crisp. And so adding first the tomato sauce to it, and this is homemade tomato sauce with our own recipe. It's quite tangy, it's a little bit spicy, absolutely delicious. And we've got a technique that we make it where it is not too wet, it's not too sloppy, and I like this on a pizza. And so then we added the sausage, and this is our take on a Thai fusion pizza. This is sausage called sai ua, and the sai ua is a traditional northern Thai sausage that is a bit spicy, and it contains usually quite a bit of lemongrass. And this sai ua we buy locally from a lovely lady down at the market here in Chom Tong. And like sausage anywhere, it really does depend on who makes it as to how good it is. And I think this is about the best sai ua I've ever eaten. So we really love adding it to our pizzas. And then we add a decent amount of grated mozzarella onto the top once we've got most of the sausage on there. So just spread the mozzarella out as evenly as possible, and then we'll add the last of the sai ua on top so that it kind of melts in, and if there's any sort of sticking up, it gets a little bit cooked, a little bit more cooked, it'll be a bit crispy, a little bit crunchy on it. And then we will put this back in the oven, and again for no predetermined amount of time because we really don't know how long it will take, having never done this before. We'll just eyeball it, so we'll just slide it in, this time onto the stone on the inside of the oven. Just carefully bring the peel back out so that the heat from the stone underneath the pizza base will hopefully cook the bottom of it, whereas it didn't really get any crisping done on it when it was in the baking tray. So we'll just leave that for long enough to melt the cheese. The sausage is already cooked, the tomato doesn't need any cooking. We'll just let it melt the cheese and brown a little bit, and just keep an eye on it until it's ready. Just turn it a few times because the fire in the pizza oven is just mostly to one side, to the left hand side. So we'll just turn the pizza and keep an eye on it, turn it every now and again so that it doesn't get overcooked. And once we can see that it's ready, it's time to pull it out, and oh, it smells so good. Nicely cooked. A little bit dark around the edges, but not really burnt. Nice melted cheese, a little bit brown on the top. That's looking like a pretty good lunch to me. And it certainly cut easier than a regular pizza. It was softer. It sounded crunchy, it sounded a bit crispy under there, especially towards the edges. And it seemed to have held together pretty well. So let's have a look. What is a sai ua gluten-free pizza like? Well, it's floppy. Underneath is brown.
Something different.
It is different, isn't it? Texture's quite different and quite fragile. So, but it had cornmeal in it. I'm not sure about that, but the flavour's good. Cheese and tomato sauce and sai ua. And the crust is crunchy. Well, I was just thinking that's the best gluten-free pizza I've ever eaten, but it's also the only gluten-free pizza I've ever eaten. So it's really difficult for me to have an objective perspective on whether I've nailed it or not, but we finished the whole thing. And considering the flavour of the bread, the flavour of the dough, it was okay. There was nothing weird about it. The texture was a little bit crumbly. It was a little bit unusual, but I anticipated that from what I've been learning about gluten-free bread. It has a different texture to it. And the pizza did droop a little bit when we picked a slice up. And that's always a little bit disappointing, but again, not too bad at all. But we did have a reasonable amount of topping on there. There was a fair weight of cheese and sausage and tomato sauce on it. So overall, I think it was not too bad. My special guests who are coming to visit that I'm making this for are my brother and my sister, who are both gluten intolerant. So my brother's had a lot more experience with gluten-free baking, so I will be checking with him when he arrives and we will experiment some more. I'm not sure whether I'll make videos of that, but I'll certainly keep it in mind. And if you've enjoyed this video, if you'd like to see more about what we do here in northern Thailand, what our lifestyle is like, you can check out this video here. And if you've enjoyed this video, give us a like. If you're new to our channel, please hit that subscribe button. Thanks very much for watching.